when October 7th made its presence known, the first thing that occurred to me, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, if I have some misapprehension, the terrible hand of Iran is behind Hamas and Hezbollah.
Mm-hmm.
Iran has absolutely no compunctions about sacrificing every single Palestinian to the cause in as brutal a fashion as possible to capitalize on the public relations scandal that can be made of that.
Yeah.
They've got no feeling whatsoever for the Palestinians. They're pure cannon fodder in the eternal war against the great Satan and Israel, right?
Yes.
The US and Israel.
Yeah.
That seems appropriate?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what the hell? I went to Oxford, and the first bloody thing that those half-wits asked me when I was on stage was if I was happy about this tweet I made on October 8th, which was, "Give them hell, Netanyahu," which I paid quite the price for, let me tell you. And although not so much a price as many people have paid, put it that way. And so what's Israel to do when they're faced with a disposable people, so to speak, that will be sacrificed at a moment's notice by their own leadership, by their own corrupt philosophy, and by the mullahs of Iran? What possible response could Israel have, except to roll over and submit?
Well, a lot of people would like them to do that, of course, but that's not an option. There's a famous story that Joe Biden tells. It's actually a good story for Joe Biden. Being Joe Biden, he's told it a lot. But he when he was a young senator, he once met Golda Meir, former prime minister of Israel, indeed the prime minister during the 73 war. And she famously said to Joe Biden when she was showing him around, you forget, Senator Biden, we have a secret weapon. And Biden thought that Golda Meir was going to tell him about Israel's nuclear project. And he was all ears. And he said, "What's your secret weapon?" She said, "We have nowhere else to go."
Right.
So anyone who thinks that rolling over is a possibility for Israel is simply somebody who wants them to be gone. What is clever about Hamas and its backers in Iran, the Iranian Revolutionary Government, is that they know exactly how to put Israel in an even more intolerable situation each time they attack. So, for instance, they know that if you kidnap Israelis, one of the absolutely central things of the fabric of Israeli society, as with most Western societies, is you don't allow your citizens to remain behind, just like you don't leave your soldiers behind. That if you fall behind enemy lines, if you are taken behind enemy lines, the state will do everything it can to get you back. And that has been a compact in Israel since the foundation in 1948, and a really central thing. So Hamas knew, and I have lots of testimony from people who, for instance, overheard terrorists on the morning as they were lying dead or other things, heard the terrorists at, for instance, the Nova Party debating which of the young girls they should shoot and which they should kidnap. And, there were debates that they might have had too many people, too many girls to take back, for instance. But Hamas did the kidnapping knowing that to have 250 Israelis in captivity is to have an unbelievable advantage over the Israelis, because they're going to have to come in. They're going to try to save them. They're going to try to rescue them.
They'll exchange hundreds of terrorists for single Israelis.
As happened recently, an exchange of Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails for committing acts of terrorism, preparing suicide vests, trying to carry out bombings, and much more, knife attacks. They will exchange sometimes hundreds of those Palestinians for, as happened the other week, the coffins of 2 Jewish babies. So,
well, one of the things that's striking about your book is your continued explication of the Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists, psychopaths, their willingness to exploit every element of human decency to wage the most destructive possible of wars,
yes.
Right? So the tunnels, let's go into that for a minute. So Gaza is 11 by 11 miles, approximately 140 square miles, 350 miles of tunnels, right? Longer than the London Underground, which is a stunning
Yes.
fact. Stunning fact.
Longer than London Underground, and as I joked to the British military friend, rather better run.
6,000 entrances, many of them in the bedrooms of children.
Oh, almost always where the tunnel entrances come up, they come up in children's bedrooms, in houses throughout Gaza. They come up inside mosques, but they come up inside hospitals. Even in 2014, the BBC acknowledged that the Hamas leadership were coming up from tunnels underneath the Shifa hospital, which is one of their command headquarters. By the way, all of that is, for anyone who cares about this, completely against every law of war. The Geneva Conventions, every convention of war is, you are not allowed to fight, you're not meant to fight in civilian clothing, you're not meant to fight and fire from places of worship, you're not meant to stockpile ammunition in hospitals, you're not meant to make civilian homes targets for reasons that our species thought we all understood.
Sufficiently victimized perpetrators have no reason to abide by any standards.
No,
How
and
about
of course,
that for an argument?
And of course, militarily, this is all to Hamas's enormous advantage, because again, they know that if there is a stockpile of ammunition or a terrorist or a tunnel entrance or whatever in a civilian home, and even if the Israelis tell all the locals to get out, the world's media will say that Israel bombed or invaded a civilian home.
Or a hospital or a place of worship.
There's a member of the Israeli
None of those words have the same meaning.
None of them.
In Gaza that they do in the West.
None at all. It's whenever it's reported that, that a hospital has been hit, it's usually reported in the world's press, as Hamas wants, that the Israelis just decided to bomb a hospital, as if they're so evil, these Israelis, that they even bomb hospitals. There was a member of the Israeli War Cabinet, Gadi Eisenkot, who I quote in the book because he lost his son fighting in Gaza in the aftermath of October the 7th, and the next day he lost his nephew, also fighting in Gaza. His nephew was killed because, as the Israelis were trying to do this incredibly delicate military operation to get back the hostages, destroy the leadership of Hamas, and minimize any possible civilian casualties, Gadi Eisenkot's nephew was fired upon from a mosque by Hamas terrorists who gleefully opened fire on him and his unit. And they were meant to be sticking to Hamas were doing that. The Israelis were trying to stick to the normal laws of conflict and not just destroy the mosque. And so they lost soldiers. This is another example of the way in which Hamas do this. Any normal society that valued the life of their own civilians, like America, Britain, Israel, would, if it knew that its people were going to come under bombardment, often do what the Israelis did in the south and indeed across much of the country, which is you build bomb shelters in every home. And you have bomb shelters in every civilian area. And across the south of Israel, that's the case, as it is in the north, because it's been being shelled by Hezbollah for 20 years. But only in Gaza do you get a situation where, and I quote one of the Hamas leaders saying this in an interview with Al Arabiya last year, this Hamas leader was asked by a friendly Arab journalist, why, if you say the civilian casualties in Gaza are so high, why can't you allow the civilians of Gaza to shelter in your tunnel networks that you've built underneath Gaza? And the Hamas leader says, but the tunnel system is not for the civilians. The tunnel system is for our fighters and for our weaponry. And the interviewer says, well, who's to look after the civilians? And he says, well, the international community.
Right. Well, that's just testament to the fact that the Palestinians are essentially cannon fodder for the eternal war against Israel and the United States.
Yes, but it's even worse than that. That of course, an army that fights by the laws of war, which the IDF does, like the American army, like the British army, makes mistakes for sure, like the American army, like the British army, but that fights by the laws of war. When it encounters a terrorist army like this, the civilized army seeks to minimize the civilian casualties, as the IDF has done, and anyone who claims that it hasn't just does not know what's been going on for the last 18 months.
And believes Hamas reports.
And believes Hamas reports.
Which why would anyone ever believe
Right.
Hamas reports?
Yeah, it's. I mean, why go to a mass murderer to find out their account of their actions? You know. But the point is that when an army like that encounters an army that not just desires death for its enemy, but desires death for the people it purports to govern, and with a kicker in it, seeks death itself. This is a realm of fanaticism and what I call it's a death cult. A cult that literally worships death. The leadership of Hamas, who I quote in the book, have for decades boasted about the extent to which they love death, embrace death. And one of the underlying things in this book, as you know, which we'll come on to doubtless later, but is what happens if a society that actually values life encounters a death cult that worships and glories in death for its foes, but also for itself. And we have
Suffering and death.
We have seen such movements throughout history. We have seen them, but most of the world has forgotten about them. And I would argue that Israel, to a great extent, forgot about them until 6:30 in the morning on October the 7th, 2023.